So, talk to me about this weekend. What's the message you're sending to the community after what was a very violent weekend?
Yeah, I just think it's another example, unfortunately, now that a family lost their young child and other people have lost their brothers or sisters or fathers, um, and that we have work to do. We have uh, area of town, a community that multiple people thought it was okay to drive by and shoot at people and hit multiple people at the same time. So um, we're working really hard to find out who was responsible for it and hold them accountable. But I think there's also a larger story here to how do we not um, have that happen again in the future.
So, what are some things that you are doing to make sure it doesn't happen again, Chief?
Well, like I said, the primary thing we're doing right now is doing the investigation on all these. There's detectives who are working right now to try to find out who and why and that this happened. So obviously, that's one of our core responsibilities to hold somebody accountable that took these folks from their family and our community as a whole. But we also work closely with brother to brother and schools like Grant High School, that's about a block from that park, trying to ensure that whether this is gang related or something else, we don't know, but the potential is there for it to be gang related. How do we have an environment where people don't feel the need to join gangs and aren't involved in that sort of activity? But clearly, somebody thought it was okay to shoot it at others, at least on one of these in the middle of the day at a park.
And so you're saying you are investigating the possibility that this might all be gang related?
Well, I don't know about all of it. There was several shootings and actions I don't know, but yeah, we're definitely looking into the possibility of this being gang related. Absolutely.
And I know that you put out a joint statement with the sheriff's office earlier in the year saying that you were dealing with what can only be described as gang wars playing out across the region. What would you then say to folks as we're watching what happens now? I mean, do you have the tools that you need to tackle this issue?
Well, first and foremost, there's no doubt that we have a gang problem in Sacramento. We have gangs in the city. We've had them for a long time. And there was some gang shootings a few months ago, going back and forth, which is probably what you're referring to. And we continue to have gang issues and gang shootings and gang retaliation and all the things that come along with having gang activity. So I mean, we've had people shot at funerals in the cemetery in this town in the last month or so. So absolutely, we need to deal with gangs. And in terms of the resources, we've had gangs in the city for many years. I grew up in a neighborhood that had a gang, had gangs. So I would say the fact that we continue to struggle with gang activity means no, the resources aren't there. Now, what those resources are is not just law enforcement resources, it's multiple resources, and it take all of us together to figure out exactly what that is. I can tell you what does work. Groups like Brother to Brother does work. They've been out there this whole entire weekend working with families. I think you're going to talk to a gentleman named Aaron Cardoza. He has done a lot in his life and is working on ensuring that others live a good life without this sort of activity. I know that's part of the solution. I don't have all the answers, but clearly more needs to be done.
We saw in Stockton when they saw that spat of gun violence that they did things like working with CHP, even working with federal agencies, flooding the certain neighborhoods with increased law enforcement, extra patrols, things like that. Is that something you think is needed here in the capital city?
Well, first and foremost, those are temporary short-term solutions. So that really the goal of that is to make arrests and kind of stop the current issue, whatever that issue is. If you have back and forth gang shootings, retaliatory shootings, and things like that, that doesn't solve the long-standing dynamics we have in neighborhoods that constantly have a flow of young people joining. So I would say that's a potential short-term fix. Part of the challenge to that is over the last couple of months, we've had countless protests where many of our specialty teams that do that sort of work have been pulled to work at the protests. So there has been probably some less presence in our neighborhoods because they've been pulled to do protests. But those are really the short-term solutions when you have an outbreak of retaliatory type shootings. But it absolutely is not long-term solution-wise.
So you would not you would say though that we might see some of that where you start, you're going to be increasing patrols, joining with state and federal forces to try to take back the streets, if you will.
Yeah, I wouldn't say the streets need to be taken back, but whether we work with state and federal agencies, I don't know yet, but there's already been increased patrols from our specialty units in neighborhoods. So what we'll do in regards to that, I don't know yet. But whether we'll do that, I'm not sure. But we are currently working with some of our own units and community groups like Brother to Brother.
You know, Chief, we did see that several arrests have been made and that several guns have been seized just over the weekend in a fairly short period of time. What's the message you're sending with that?
Well, I'm not sending any message. That's a pretty regular weekend for us. Our officers seize a lot of guns every night off the streets, out of cars. It's a pretty regular occurrence in our city.
It shows, though, that, I mean, you are working these cases and that when you can, you're making arrests, that you're trying to do what you can to respond to this uptick in violence. What do you credit it to, Chief? I mean, 35 homicides this year so far, 25 this time last year. What do you think is behind the increase in violence?
Well, I don't know. There's probably, just like anything else, there's probably a lot of reasons, but the violence can go up and down from year to year. We've had a lot more homicides than this in past years. But the reality is, incidents like this isn't the first time people have been shot at Mama Marks Park. This isn't the first time we've had a weekend with multiple shootings. This isn't the first time we've seen this sort of thing. So it clearly more needs to be done as these things continue to go up and down. All it takes is, for gang shootings, all it takes is one beef where that will result in multiple shootings. And there's clearly too many guns floating around in hands of people that shouldn't have guns, that are willing to shoot at other people. In this incident in the park, obviously here's families in a park and enjoy the day, and now they've lost a family member. So, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we need to do it, else we're going to continue to see incidents like this.
What do you say to those families, Chief? I mean, I know it's something, this is your community. You grew up here in Sacramento. What do you say when you see this type of thing happening here in the town you grew up in and love?
Well, I don't know what you possibly can say to somebody that lost a 9-year-old child. I mean, that's unspeakable. I can assure our community and these families that our officers are working tirelessly to find out who did it and hold them accountable. But in terms of what you say to a family like that, obviously my heart goes out to this family. But I'll tell you what, I don't know what you say to a family that just lost their 9-year-old child. I couldn't imagine.
It's heartbreaking, Chief.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Are there things that I have not asked that you want to get across with us, Chief? I know that it's been a long weekend. I hear it in your voice. I see it in your eyes. You know, as you mentioned, we're going to be talking with brother to brother. I know this is personal for you, though. I mean, because, you know, we started the year out and you were talking about we hadn't had any youth deaths, youth homicides. And it was the first time in a long time where we hadn't had that, where we were really seeing some progress in that way. And so for us to be at this space, do you think it's the pandemic? Do you think it is some of the social net that has been taken away from people during this? What's happening?
Well, I think that's maybe some pitfall that we can fall into, trying to nail it down to one thing. Does the pandemic impact it? I'm sure it does. People are very frustrated and very angry about a lot of things right now, and the pandemic being one of them. It's kind of changed people's lives around. But I would imagine there's a lot of things. Matter of fact, I know there's a lot of things at play and a lot of things that need to be addressed, especially in communities like El Paso Heights. There is a lot of things that need to be addressed that have been around historically. So I would say, what can we do? The first and foremost, we can support, lift up organizations that have their heart in the right place and truly care about the people that live in our communities and are helping them. I think you're going to interview one of them today, and Aaron, and there's others like him and Brother to Brother that are doing a good job. We need more people like that. We need to support more people like that. We need to fund more people like that. And we need to get to the systemic issues that continue to allow this sort of thing to happen in our communities. I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to say that we have disparate communities in our city. We have communities that have more resources, better schools, better things for young people to do, better support systems. And that when you lack those sort of things, you allow kind of evil, bad things to creep in. And that's what leads to things that we saw this weekend, where people now have to bury their small child or bury a family member and are searching for answers. But it's not like it's the first time that it's happened. It's happened before. We've said these same things the last time things like this have happened. So we need to really support the groups that are working really hard to change things around in these communities, whether that's just family support, whether it's education, whether it's jobs, support services such as mental health and drugs and things like that. We lack a lot of those sort of services that can help people get back on their feet and support families to support their loved ones, so people don't rely on either joining gangs or just illegal activity in general and trying to harm other people in our community. So there's groups in our community that are working on this and have the experience and have the connection and have the trust in our communities. And we need to really support those groups and build them up so they can expand and do more of that work and find long-term solutions to communities that have been struggling for decades.